This is from the Daily Mail. Luigi Mangione copycat unmasked as his mother reveals why he turned up at UnitedHealthcare ready to kill. Did you guys catch this story? We briefly mentioned it, but the news has now come out. Ian Stanley Wagner, 26, was arrested after he arrived at the UnitedHealthcare HQ at Minnetonka with a gun, threatening to shoot it up. His mom, apparently they say that he had no known motives against them. We don't know what this is. So it is clear. This is just somebody who was inspired by the likes of Taylor Lorenz, who said she gains a big audience by defending Luigi Mangione. And she said that women view him as morally good and handsome. What do you think this guy is thinking when he hears this on CNN? So why does Luigi Mangione do what he did, allegedly, and why are leftists supporting him? Well, as Taylor Lorenz laid out, they view the system as largely dysfunctional with no means of rectifying any of their perceived problems. Now, don't get me wrong. I never said they were smart. No one ever accused them of being as such. Shooting a random guy who happens to be the CEO of a company who just got hired like a year prior literally changed nothing. So not only was Mangione very dumb, he's also particularly ineffective at bringing about change. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is nonviolent and bringing about tremendous change. But the reason I bring this up in the context of the greater conversation is you mentioned previously your fears of civil war. Or the potentiality of one, not that you were saying it was going to happen. So I would just posit this. Who in this country, which political faction, has driven us to the brink of civil strife and generated the fears of a civil war? The Democrats arrested Trump's lawyers. That is unconstitutional. They claimed it's justified because they're criminals. Sure, that's what dictators do. They falsely accused him of crimes. They tried to prevent him from running for office. They argued he was ineligible, which is a lie. You look at what these similar elements do in Europe. They remove Marine Le Pen and what's his name, Georgescu or whatever.
Yeah, that's
I'm pronouncing his name wrong. In Romania, they say he's ineligible. You can't run. They are actively trying to strip the rights of the people. Outside of that, at the lower tiers, they are firebombing Tesla stores. They are attacking private Tesla owners. They are shooting up cars. They are murdering people, cheering on more. If there is a risk of civil war or strife or whatever is going on, the escalation is purely from the political left wing, which includes liberals, it includes socialists and communists, etc.
People like Luigi Mangione make me actually consider wanting to send criminals to places like El Salvador. And on this Taylor Lorenz thing, something that I think she said that is extremely telling was that, oh, look, I gained a big audience as a result of my coverage of him. Online people, personalities are so susceptible to audience capture or perceived audience capture. One of her main points is, oh, why is this an important thing to cover? And why is this an important thing to continue supporting? Because I get support online. That is one of the reasons that she actually supports this. And I think that's a large reason why a lot of influencers online in conservative or liberal spaces support what they do support. So that's all to say, I think a lot of this stuff is AstroTurf. To anybody who supports Luigi Mangione clearly has something wrong with them in the head. And I think that of Taylor Lorenz. I also think that of the people who platform Taylor Lorenz, like CNN.
I hear you, but this is what is it, like 70% of the left support Luigi Mangione to some degree?
So I think it's leftists, not liberals, who generally support Luigi Mangione.
I don't think that's true.
You think it's liberals?
Maybe not a majority of general liberals, like moderate voters, but I believe that maybe a third. I'll look it up to fact check.
AOC supporters, yes, but Cory Booker supporters, no. If that's...
It seems like a pretty hardline communist type position.
Because if you're a leftist, you're an eat the rich, and this goes along with like Medicare for all.
47% of very liberal individuals, according to YouGov, had a favorable view of Luigi Mangione. 31% of very liberals. Let me pull up the full report. Actually, December.
Does it say what percentage have mental illness? Because I'd assume it was most of them.
Again,
you truly, I really think it can't be overstated how sick of an individual you have to be mentally to support something like this.
It's the vigilante obsession with vigilantism that I think is driving it. And if you don't know what's actually happening at the echelons of finance that are controlling the flow of money with the healthcare system and the food industry, if you don't know, on its face, it looks like pharma bad, pharma CEO worse. And I love a good vigil. You know, there's people thinking like John Wick's a hero.
Wow. John Wick?
Yeah, he goes full vigilante and starts killing just indiscriminately a bunch of people.
And so 28% of liberals are favorable or very favorable or somewhat favorable to Luigi Mangione. 30% don't know. 16% of moderates are favorable. 15% of conservatives are favorable, and 6% of very conservatives are favorable.
Is there a gender breakdown as well?
Let's see. I don't know. There's
a whole lot of this going on.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's an age breakdown, but the age largely aligns with political ideology as well.
It seems as though women are. It's not just Luigi Mangione, but it's this type of like, I don't know, murderer where women feel very drawn to them and write letters to them in jail.
No,
maybe you
it's the
could
whole thing.
explain to us.
I actually listened to a really good podcast on this recently, and I'm so mad I'm blanking on what it was, but it did a great deep dive into the psyche behind this of women being attracted to criminals. And I think that's on a surface level. We were actually talking about this in the green room. If you identify with a victim or you identify with like somebody in the case, you know, that can cause a lot more interest as a woman. So if somebody my age is murdered or something happens to somebody who has similar background to me, I have more interest in that case or more attachment to it. But when you get into the women actually being attracted to the murder, so past this, the passing interest in true crime, that, as according to the podcast I listened to, but I thought this was a good theory, is women being attracted to the power that men have, like the brute force that men have, and wanting to inhabit it for themselves to a degree.
He's a bad boy. He's a dangerous man, of course.
But at an individual level.
Yeah.
That's why an individual who murders lots of people has a carnal kind of power.
So, so you guys, most of you guys have heard of Homath, right?
No.
That account. Yeah.
There's this one TikTok or whatever that he made, and it's not really about him, but it's about the girl that he was talking about. This woman was saying, "I just want to meet the guy that takes his sword and puts it under my chin and lifts it up," right? Because the point is, the dude just like the fantasy is he just slaughtered the village and she's the one he leaves, and instead of killing her, he picks her. And what it is he has the power to do absolutely horrific violence, and it has massive power, but he chooses not to for her.
So she has him under her thumb.
Well, I don't know about it. I'm not so much sure that it's the control, but he has chosen her. So he doesn't do violence to her. He protects her. And that's what people think. When women look at Luigi Mangione, he's an attractive guy that has the ability to go and commit violence.
And this is why the overwhelmingly young women are sexually attracted to Donald Trump.
Because of his meekness.
Do we have data on that?
That is not correct.
That phenomenon is called meekness. What you said, the meek shall inherit the earth. It's the one that's very powerful but knows how to not use it.
Not what,
That's not what he said.
That's not what meek is.
Meek is someone that's very strong and dangerous, but they choose not to use it.
No.
Check it out.
That's not what
That's
that's not what Phil's
meekness
saying
is.
either.
He's saying that the guy that murders the town has the ability to kill the woman, but he
Meek,
chooses to
quiet,
protect her.
gentle, and easily imposed upon, and submissive.
Yeah, that's not what meek means.
You should keep reading about it.
Well, I just pulled it up. That's what it says.
Yeah,
It comes from the Old Norse mjörk, mjúkur, which means soft and gentle, which evolved through modern English to mjök, which means courteous.
It can be the implied to patience and endurance in the face of injury, but the common understanding is that you're quiet and
docile. That's the misnomer.
Tim has just pulled it up here. In the Bible, a meek specifically refers to what you're talking to.
So yes,
strength
the
with
Bible.
control.
Well,
it's a particular thing in this.
No.
That's
Under
why they
the
say
Bible,
the meek,
strength
the meek
under
shall inherit
control.
the earth is what they say in the Bible. That's what they're talking about. The strong ones that know
means
how to
humility.
not. Yeah, you total annihilative strength, but you know how not to exercise.
But again,
it
that's not
unnecessarily.
what Phil was saying.
Well, he's saying the guy slaughters the village, but then he chooses not to slaughter
That's
the
not
woman.
meekness.
That's not
I
meek.
think
That's
it is. I think
lust.
you know when to protect and you know when to destroy.
It's
That's
not.
what makes
No,
someone
it's
meek.
not meek. The point is she likes him because of his exercising of power. A meek person has power and doesn't exercise it. That's what makes them meek.
Or they know when to exercise it.
Well, I mean, maybe, but the context that we're talking about, like that's to call a guy that just slaughtered a whole village meek is an error of use of definition.
I wouldn't, if he hadn't chosen to protect the woman after he slaughtered the village, I wouldn't have called him meek. But that's the aspect that's meekness there, is that, I mean,
You are
need I
misunderstanding.
go on? I don't
Okay.
know.
Yes. What Phil is referring to is that a man who massacres a ton of people has chosen to exert his strength over everyone else to the point where he's ended their life, and then she is spared. That's not meekness. Meekness would be a barbarian king like Genghis Khan comes to the village and says, "I will spare all of you for this beautiful woman."
I get where you're coming from.
I don't agree with you guys, by the way.
But it's
I mean,
not,
I don't want to
it's,
argue about this.
But yeah, it doesn't matter.
Luigi
You're
Mangione-
saying
about
is-
biblical-
It doesn't
what
matter
you're
because
saying
So
it's
let's do this. Luigi Mangione will be acquitted. He will be acquitted because far leftists are going to riot outside the courthouse, and they're going to they're going to stalk the jurors, and the jury is going to enter court surrounded by men with rifles, and they are going to know when they go home The juror's wife is going to say, if you put him in prison, they're going to kill us. And he's going to say, I'll just say not guilty. I'll just say not guilty. And he's going to get acquitted. That's the country we live in right now. And even if Donald Trump were to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy law enforcement, whatever jurisdiction they're trying him in, you cannot escape 200,000 people across the country and every 10,000 people in every big city smashing windows and burning things down. When Derek Chauvin went to court, the defense argued. The defense had a guy on cross and said, was he justified, Derek Chauvin, in using a greater degree of force? And they said yes. The continuum of force training in Minnesota allows for Chauvin to have escalated to impact weapons, not just restraint. He chose not to escalate. Even though they argued that, the jury still convicted him. The feds still went after him. Why? When a jury is being brought into a courtroom surrounded by men with guns, and they can see all around them far left terrorists threatening to murder them, they're not going to cross them. So Luigi Mangione literally shoots and kills a guy, and he's being celebrated by Colbert. He's being celebrated. I should say, the people on these shows, they've celebrated the Tesla terror attacks. It is going to be painfully obvious to anybody who's on the jury when they look at these polls that overall you have 21% of all U.S. adults who are favorable towards Luigi Mangione. 21%. It only takes 10 crazy people. If you are known to 10 crazy people, your life is in jeopardy. But when you have Taylor Lorenz on CNN laughing it up with Donnie O'Sullivan, he's so handsome. This juror is going to be like, oh my God, not guilty.
I don't know how Mangione can get a fair trial. He's too public. Like, what do you do? It's the same thing with Chauvin. Like, how did you couldn't give that guy a fair trial?
He's going to be found not guilty. He's not. My understanding is he's not taking a plea agreement. And I could be wrong. I'm just saying.
Did they offer him one?
I don't know where we're currently at with this. I am saying that. I mean, tell me if you think I'm wrong. If you're in the chat, tell me if you think I'm wrong. Will leftist rioters threaten the lives of jurors in the Mangione case to force them to rule him not guilty?
I haven't seen anything lately that leads me to believe that there is that energy that we had in 2020.
I think it was the lockdowns that pushed that.
You don't think that like the firebombing over 50 different firebombing of Tesla locations, which includes over 50 different terror attacks on Tesla vehicles and facilities, doesn't show that energy is here?
When you say 50 different terror attacks on facilities and vehicles, are you talking about individual vehicles? Are you talking about individual vehicles and by graffiti and stuff? Or is it 50 different places where they were actually firebombs?
The report is that there have been 50 incidents of terror attacks on Tesla pertaining to Tesla vehicles and facilities. I feel like that probably does include individual vehicles. I'm not entirely sure. That was just the report. That's over 50 at this point.
I guess my question is how many people are carrying out those attacks? Because, I mean, having a few crazy people doing terrorist things doesn't mean that we're going to see what we saw.
Yeah,
if you had one stalker, would you be terrified?
In 2020, had...
If one person threatened
the energy where it was in 2020, and I don't feel that it is either.
Is that required to convince a jury to rule not guilty?
I don't think the pressure campaign's going to get to that point. I think
has there ever been
a lot of people online talking trash and doing this whole thing, like when the billionaire died going to see Titanic, and all the people on TikTok were like, yeah, Titanic, send more billionaires down. Are they people who express themselves in this kind of way, and is that awful? Yes. But does that mean these are actually violent people who are going to carry out violent actions and threaten people or commit illegal acts? I don't think so. I think there are a lot of pissed off people who are angry, and they're angry at the elite, and they're expressing that through these kinds of polls.
The 2020 riots were about lockdowns, not about George Floyd.
I agree.
So without something as infuriating as being locked in your home for several months, I don't know that we ever get to riots that were just random wanton destruction. However, we have had protests, every single weekend for the past 3 months, escalating. We have had 50 attacks on Tesla, to whatever degree that is. I know that 15 of them were serious arson and shootings, because that was the report back last month. That was where the guy firebombed the charging station. One guy shot up a Tesla dealership, and we had a bunch of those instances. There was about 15 of them. I don't know about the remaining 35 that may just be on vehicles, individual vehicles, but I'm not sure if that's the case. The left right now is organizing for an April 19th nationwide protest, which they're arguing And all over Reddit, they're saying will be the biggest that we've seen in this country in years, or since the Iraq
That'll
War.
be your bellwether, but to me, it feels like the wind has been sucked out of the sails ever since Trump's election.
I hope that's the case.
I
because
feel
that means
like
Trump won.
people
That means we won.
feel very demoralized. I feel like they feel like it was such an overwhelming victory that I feel like it's actually gone quiet, if anything. And I mean, I'm somebody in the middle. I'm very independent. I'm not really a Trump fan. I've never voted for Trump. I like some things Trump does. But I don't see that kind of energy, that kind of resistance, that kind of organizing. And that's the real key, right? That's what was so dangerous about 2020 was the organizing factor. You had actual intentionality, people who understood ground games that were behind those protests. They were not
I
organic.
suppose it's. I will say this. I hope you're right, because my argument in the election was that if Trump won the popular vote, too many people would be like, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history, and so they'd immediately back off whatever the shenanigans was going to be. That being said, spring has only just sprung. We're about a month in. It's starting to get nice out, and so the question is going to be, how big do the protests get in the summer, which is riot season?
I think that the actual issue is less the protests and riots, and more the fact that the left seems to have people or a fewer amount of people willing to do more than they were willing before. So there were 2 attempts on Trump's life. You have people actually firebombing Tesla dealerships. Now, there was destruction of property and stuff during the Summer of Love, but it was not targeted.
Yeah.
We have the swattings.
Pardon me?
Swattings this year. We've
Yeah,
had
so
20
it's-
plus people swatted. It's attempted
Yeah.
murder. Owen Schroyer taking his shirt off and walking backwards at gunpoint.
So I think that there's something to that. The fact that they're willing to go. There are fewer people that are involved, so you don't have the average normie. The people that have to go to work are going to work as opposed to being caught up at home with nothing to do, or the people that are motivated to have something outside of political activism or political rioting or whatever. They're not going to be involved. But I do think that there is something to the intensity of the few people that do act. The intensity
I agree
levels
with that,
higher.
actually. The political extremism within
Yeah.
the fringes is perhaps more volatile. And I think the left, and I think communism as a whole, is an inherently violent ideology. And I think as those extremes on the left move closer and closer to true Marxism, you're going to see more and more of that. And I think to some extent that the right and the entire MAGA movement has been in response to that growth on the left. And that's, horseshoe theory repeating over and over. So, and that's where my fear comes in, because if the right says they're doing this, so we match them, and we just keep doing this, that ends up in some very scary places ultimately.
Yes, but if you don't match them, you get a communist revolution.
And this is something
communists are knocking on your door trying to break it down. And the argument is, do we push back or do we just sit back?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we talked about a little bit here on the show before. Look, if there's going to be some kind of political uprising, I want it to be when the conservatives are in control of the apparatus of the state. Because if the left is in control of the apparatus of the state, you're gonna see things that will turn into an abolition of property rights, or the significant problems that the left causes in countries around the world. Those kind of things will come here, and that will cascade globally, because if you don't have solid property rights here in the United States, that's going to be a massive problem for investment here, and there's a problem for investment here that cascades globally. So I think those kind of problems are something that we need to avoid, and if that means that the revolution should happen when there's a conservative in charge so they control power, then I'm okay with that.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.